Okay, hello. It's September 15th, 2022, and it's our first meeting in the of this phase or sector of the ISSS education efforts. I've posted the CODA link, and if anyone doesn't have like viewer edit access, just post your email address in the chat or request it and I'll provide that. There are many ways to begin education as the infinite game and bestowed with many other excellent ways to describe and explore it. So in this initial discussion, I'm going to be really focusing on taking a lot of notes, hearing a lot of what people have to add in their perspective. So please like raise your hand in Zoom if you want to address anything, or after posting your email in the chat, if need be, everybody will have edit access so you can make comments directly. So I have an outline of some things to move through. But before we even begin that, is there just anything that people would just like to say or remark on about systems in education?
A very big topic, which goes without saying. I think the the question for me is, what is the role of ISSS in systems education? That's the question I think would be a helpful one to have a clarity on, for me.
Great. Anyone else want to add anything? Otherwise, I'll share a little bit more information up front to give us some context, and then we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, go ahead and share.
All right. So again, I'm in this page, meeting number 1. So I wanted just to provide some state of the education and communication, as the full role is actually VP of Education and Communication. Talk about where we're at in mid-September 2022. And as we set off on this journey that will be measured and documented and motivated, but hopefully also within people's like availabilities and in and outs. So hope that everybody can participate who's here, as well as people who are probably going to watch the recording or just jump in later, even as things develop. Okay, so I began in this role as the VP of Education, let's just call it, a few months ago. And so spent the first weeks of that role or position learning just a little bit more about ISSS, getting involved with some web efforts and knowledge management with Peter, and just trying to take stock. So I'm going to talk about 2 main aspects of how I was taking stock, which is first some descriptive interactions with passive artifacts, and then some interactions with living artifacts. So first, the ISSS bylaws and mission. And in CODA, like an @ you can link to a page. So the blue links will go to a page. So I went to the ISSS bylaws and I Control F'd for the term education to understand in specific how was education related to ISSS. Because a priori, I thought systems is like about education, whether we're learning and we want it to be accessible, or whether we're applying it and we want it to be rigorous. Lifelong learning is like the thread of systems. But it's also good to have some specific letter of the bylaw. In the objectives of the ISSS, again, arguably all of it could be said to be relevant for education, but these are just specifically mentioning education, that ISSS is developing and providing programs for education, learning and application, and then just all of the verbs related to relevant contributions and impacts in our niche, in our societies. As for my role specifically, it is responsible for facilitating systems education by doing sets of other verbs. So I don't expect to be the hub or the choke point or kingpin or whatever, or curriculum creator. I think it's going to be a broader coordinated effort. Another role is to study and report on global initiatives related to systems education, and just sense making and documenting them is like already quite a challenge enough. And then here's a specific task about or role responsibility about special issues in journals, which is still relevant. It also may have been more relevant in a more journal driven niche. So we can think about that as just like advocating for systems to have a position and a platform in places where it wouldn't necessarily have that. There are, in general, this last point, 653, our society promotes educational publications and materials, broadly education and communication. And then there is a committee known as the Educational Programs and Materials Committee, which is not currently active, as I believe, but please correct me if this is not the case. And I don't know about the whole history. Yeah, okay, so it's not currently active. I am a co-chairperson of any such committee would it arise. And again, like it's not currently active, so I just wanted to bring it up as like a potential envelope or container for some of the work as we explore what kinds of coordination and containers make sense, because there's SIGs, special interest groups, as well as many other ways to go. So just wanted to bring it up because it was mentioned in the bylaws. All right, so that was one aspect of where education is at, just based upon the bylaws. There's also a SIG, Designing Educational Systems. And although there are not many updates from this group in the last several years, I've learned that it is active. Haven't gotten into close contact with anyone who's stewarding this SIG, but I'm totally open to it, and we have it as an initiative, so we can return to that idea. Like, of course, how can these different containers be integrated and like synergistically be aligned? And then there are, other than what is specified in the bylaws and the SIGs, as anyone who has been in ISSS for like 20 minutes or more probably knows, like people are engaged in so many diverse efforts, whether they're formally named, like whether it's George writing textbooks and everything, or whether it's people who are engaged in like professional education, maybe even like opportunities that aren't publicly available. So like everyone has just some facet, especially the people probably who are going to be involved and interested in contributing here, are especially going to have like experience and interest in projects that they've worked on outside of ISSS or inside. Another relevant project within ISSS at this time is the knowledge engineering work. So this is another separate coda. Again, anybody who wants to can absolutely be added in. Peter and I and others had our first meeting last week, and knowledge engineering and education are on the same time slot, just speaking for the period right now, alternating weeks. So it just to keep like a bi-weekly rhythm for people who only want to participate in one, and just keep a scheduling convenience for those who want to participate in both. And among many other things that we explored here, we're going to be focusing on like the accessibility and the discoverability of vast amounts of ISSS information, which is sitting at the intersection of web as our interface and communication, as well as the utility and the meaning of that information, which is education. And so if people are interested in knowledge engineering, please be involved. Otherwise, we can think of knowledge engineering as being like our um, internal ISSS resource synthesizers and presenters. And then potentially knowledge engineering could bring in other resources from other groups. Thank you, Gary. That would be one great angle to pursue. Um, so that knowledge engineering project is initially focused on assessing and determining initial approaches towards curating and making decades of content available through the website in a modern way. And there's a mind map that Peter has created that has like a typology or a taxonomy or however of different kinds of resources and their availability. So there's many like things we're just trying to like scope out the landscape and then understand what formats will be flexible and powerful. Okay, so those are some ISSS things happening. Then there's the recent activities that I've engaged in just personally, in a way, preparing for this meeting, because it is a multiplayer scenario. I also wanted to put in like a lot of diligence beforehand so that for the first people who stepped into this situation onwards, that they would feel like there was a coherent approach in what we're doing. So one fun tab to explore is questions. And we can just, of course, continue adding, but we're driven by questions, and so many amazing questions were raised to me in this investigation that I started. And it began when I sent an email with Peter's help out to the ISSS membership, which was hyper personalized. And in fact, many people believed that I was personally emailing them, which resulted in some funny email threads. But in fact, it did go out to everybody just with their first name in the top of the email. And the email asked, as many of you probably received, like for ISSS members and non-members and beyond, what can the ISSS do, be, and provide? All these communications that I've sent are in a bottom section of the coda, but just for people, if you don't need to go there. So we sent out this email, and I also posted a modified version of it on LinkedIn in several places. Just again asking, like, for ISSS and members and non-members, what can we do, be, and provide, and where are we at with systems education? And opened up many threads. And the way that I followed with these threads, first I'll mention the people section, and then we'll go to the initiatives, which is going to be like an artifact of great development. So there are about 60 people here. This is like a coda table, and tables in a way are like this. I'm also using control and scroll to change the font size in coda, or you could use control plus minus. This table, the left grouping is whether the person is an ISSS member or not. So let's just like look at the ISSS members, almost all of whom responded to the email directly. So what I did was I took their name, their email address, assessed their interest and their status, like whether they just wanted to be kept posted or whether they were potentially with capacity to help, any other notes. And then in this column where you see a little icon like that and it's lit up, that means that you can open it, and that is where the content of the communications that they've sent are. So it's also very searchable. So if we wanted to look for somebody who had mentioned a certain thing, we could find that. And I don't, no one was sending me like redactable information or anything like that. And even if they would have, it definitely is not in this table. This is just meant to be like the professional descriptive messages that people sent in direct response to the query. And then where possible, I had a meeting with the person, and anyone could contribute and curate this. Like I just added more information on, so this will be kind of like having awareness or visibility about how we're developing relations with other people, because we will all be like friendly and on the inside of ISSS and meeting regularly and stuff. But we also may want to be maintaining through long time relationships with people who are like in ISSS, but like very busy or only available in like Windows, or also especially people who are outside of ISSS. And so being able to like say, oh, here's just a person who I think we could contact, and then their status could be like, make a contact, and we could have a template in communications for making that kind of a contact. And some people were only contacted on LinkedIn, not on email. So these people, just in their primary responses, to say nothing of like secondary email threads or the live meetings that I had with many of them, they provided like a lot of insights. So the way I tried to do this was not a Cynefin driven process. It was just a total ad hoc. What I did was I created an initiatives table just to broadly make sense of these categories. And the initiatives are summarized with a single word, just like to give them a title. They could have a call sign or something in the future, and just a bit more of a description about what they are. And then I noted some, but not all of the people who are interested in each of these initiative areas. Not like maybe they have worked in the area, they want to, or they specifically said that they want to do it with ISSS. And so just to list them for those who are listening along: adventures, applications, bridges, consulting, crises, games, health, mentorship, participation, platforms, projects, readings, research, SIG, symposia, trainings, visualization, youth, videos, and web. So I then, under knowledge engineering as an extant project and initiative already, clustered like the video and the web functionality under knowledge engineering. So should people want to be involved or interfacing with education on those kind of like initiative dimensions, we can figure out what to call different like levels of organization and so on. Like knowledge engineering is going to be hosting these type of functionalities. And these are we're not going to go in all directions at the same time. So some of these will be like seed projects, and maybe somebody will join us in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years, and they're going to be like, I'm really into this seed project. So at that point, having some development around like, here are some, if you were wanting to build bridges with education, here's a person who mentioned relevant ones. And hopefully without being like library / Tower of Babel situation, if you have a thought on one of these areas, you can always just incrementally be making that a contribution. Like just crises, like, oh, there's not enough information. Okay, climb it. Now somebody else will be able to step in and continue the momentum. And in the coming like weeks to months, basically the end of this year, fleshing out some of the initiatives, which may include like lumping and splitting, and so we're not crystallized on the categories or anything like that, but being able to develop some of these initiatives, some of which would require like ISSS work and development, other ones which might be quite low-hanging fruit based around coordinating organizations or materials that already exist, or like plugging into other ongoing projects. But I just tentatively believe that over the coming months, we can get quite a lot of development on like one to several of these initiatives. And then that could provide like more footholds for people to participate, because the open call, what do you think about systems education, is like it's the few and the brave who respond to that email. But we have this program, and here's two things or two ways that you could do it, or you could send this along to somebody who could. I think these will provide some more tangible and specific ways for people to get involved. And this like coda and group and meeting time will be trying to coordinate and make sense of what will be happening. Um, Especially because it's really like it's a systems education and application ecosystem. I have not been in the game as long as probably all of you here, but there are so many methods, tools, approaches, and just like fundamental, like philosophical slash theological dimensions that it, on one hand, stymies the dedicated. And then the shadow of that is it like reduces accessibility for people who genuinely are already curious, or it kind of quenches curiosity potentially. I don't know about this, and maybe there's been work on it, but how can there be so much discourse about systems, systemic issues, wicked problems, and so on, and yet we see more of the same than what I think many systems people express as believing what could be like different or better. And like when I thought about how I want to even work, it's not my only two adjectives, but they're pluralist and pragmatist, because I think we need to think about uh, initial triage and building momentum and doing things now, especially because there's so many things already in the air, but building for a long term, but with like utility in mind, as not as the only objective function, but with utility and meaning in mind. And then like pluralism being something that applies in many ways. I think each of these initiatives we could think about how pluralism matters, but I only want to like speak positively and clearly. So for another time to do autopsies on other systems initiatives, but like systems learning and application happens in so many contexts and ways that I don't think that at this level of analysis we need to be coming down too hard um on like differences in perspective, for example, because what works in one situation doesn't necessarily work in another situation. So we can keep what we personally or at a group level don't prefer at an arm's distance, and like make sure that with the ISSS internal projects that those are stewarded in like the most positive way. And then if somebody else wants to be a salesperson for their flavor or approach, I still think that they can be a useful component of a system's ecosystem. But we can, and try to even clarify this as we go, but like we can try to be plural as like an education committee or however this group ends up being. That is what I wanted to share initially, is that we have 40 ISSS members, and these are just people who have been in active contact, but there's other people who are inside and outside ISSS who we are, it's quite easy to re-engage with even large sets of these people based upon their interest, based upon new opportunities that we're providing. So there's many ways to go, and I created just a few little stub pages, like which we can make into tables and so on, with different tools, courses, resources, connecting to the website as part of the related work in knowledge engineering and so on. But I guess there I will see what anyone like wants to add or ask or where to go.
You say you haven't been in it a very long time, but you seem to have a fairly good handle on the diversity and some of the debates, or at least anticipating some of the debates that might come along. For my part, it's a very straightforward kind of ask that I need to get from this. I'm happy to contribute whatever if I can get some of that. And that is, I work in health, and as everybody knows, health systems don't work anymore. And the reason for that is that we take an analytical approach rather than a systems approach. And I realized this in my own career, and I work in a subdiscipline of public health called public health intelligence, which always doesn't live up to its name. And we've just come to a dead standstill now. So I've been spending the last couple of years trying to build capacity in the UK around this, around systems thinking and how we can intervene. So I'm very interested in education, and I've started teaching a course in the department, the first one. And it's hard going, even though I've taught a lot before, never in this area. And I'm a bit stuck. So that's why I thought when you guys sent your email around, or Daniel, when you sent your email around, I thought I'd come and hear what you guys had to say, what you were talking about.
Oh, yeah, welcome, and thrilling to have you part of this. I mean, obviously, the other members of this group know each other and have worked together over the years, actually, and have, you know, some shared perspectives. And having a particular application like yours could be very catalytic and helpful. Okay. So I just not to dismiss the work that Gary's doing, you know, so comprehensively within the systems engineering, and of course Jen in her work in watershed management in Canada, and my own work in numerous fields. So I just wanted to say thank you and welcome. You know, I've had a lot of fun with Daniel over the past 6 weeks, and we've been doing a lot. And I've been trying to, you know, to do my bit to get him up to speed from my perspective anyway, because there's such a lot to do, and there's a certain urgency about it, whether you're talking about health systems, or in my case, water systems stretching from springs to ocean literacy, which is my thing. You know, there's a lot to do, and it needs to be done quickly. And even though we're a very small group, ISSS has at least a historical legacy. And one would like to think the potential on a global stage, if not a local stage, to make a significant contribution. But we're sort of struggling to find that way at the moment, I think. And I'd like to hear from Gary and George and Jennifer too. And the other problem that we've got is that we're all volunteers by and large. So and it's a relatively small organization now. I mean, it was in the thousands and thousands, and we're now in the hundreds. So there's another challenge there in terms of what can we actually do with the resources we have.
Well, I'll add to the conversation. I'm basically, I would certainly do more than just support activities, but I think my expertise in the long run is in curriculum development and pedagogy, since that was my career. So, you know, some of these other initiatives I would like to see get on a firm footing in terms of what they're going to use as the basis of teaching, or providing materials to teachers for teaching systems. So that's kind of where I see myself in all of this. If we get to the point of saying we're going to actually develop some curriculum, and methods of delivery then, and perhaps getting aligned with teacher training courses and things of that nature. I think that's where I could be of greatest assistance.
Thank you, Gary or Jennifer.
Was there a question? Because if it was, I think I missed it.
No particular question, just if you wanted to add in any thoughts at this time.
Ah, okay. I'm okay. Thanks.
Okay. Gary?
Well, so I've
Deep
been
subject.
struggling. Yes, I've been, well, myself and others have been struggling with the idea of, you know, what is system science and what isn't system science, and what's it for, and how do we integrate all of the great stuff we've got in a coherent way that can be communicated. So one of the things I'm doing with in COSI, they're one of the main partners in something called the Systems Engineering Body of Knowledge, and I'm the senior editor for Part 2, which is Systems Engineering Foundations. So what I'm trying to do there is use that, and it's wiki based. What I'm trying to do there is use it as an integration point for our diverse knowledge, with short articles which then lead out to you know, other stuff. So and that is used by educators. Yeah. So one of the things that the SE guys, sorry, the SE bot guys explain at the moment is, and there's a lot of educational bodies which have their names you know, posted, you know, advertised as supporting the SE bot. So there's a potential for engagement through that with those education bodies. You know, that key question of, you know, what makes the grade? You know, what do you teach? So, you know, those are my thoughts, really. Yeah, I think the SEBOC is a key potential resource, both in terms of providing an entry point into the knowledge, and it's also because it has those connections with a number of education bodies. That's a route we can utilize, I think. The other thing about the SEBOC is I want diverse systems organizations to contribute to it, which is one of the reasons why I've been investing a bit of time in connecting with systems dynamics and operations research and the Waters Foundation and, you know, the Cabreras, DSRP, and, you know, there's lots of them. Yeah, and then there's all of the systems change organizations. Yeah, systems transformation organizations, you know, the systems innovation platform is, you know, a great meeting place for people who, you know, get engaged in systems approaches and want to do system stuff. There's a lot of people and organizations contribute to that. So, you know, although the ISSS is a small organization, I think with you know, with our heritage and, you know, the connections that we have the potential to really leverage that and do something, you know, really significant. That's what I think.
Anyone else like to add anything? All right. Well, there's a few areas of like structuring and curation that I'm seeing that will be helpful, like domains of application, improving the state and probably splitting out like these types of entities, because like one thing that was previously mentioned that I really resonated is like, what do we provide learners? And then the next like level up is like that's like the direct learning. Then there's like, what can we provide teachers? Like a 1 hour or a 1 year, and then another even higher like leverage point is like educating the teachers with systems education. So there's like, last mile, when somebody types in what is systems or how is systems thinking applied, like we just have to be a realist about these modes of education. We might not prefer the epistemic or attention niche as it is right now, but we also probably believe that systems can contribute something that's like vital and maybe even preferable to other kinds of learning. But where is that resource where people can go learn? I've looked through Cbook and I enjoyed what I read. It's great that there's such like a professional approach here, and it's one piece of the puzzle. So I want to take another look at this body of knowledge. And then as then many people in the responses and pointed out here, it's like the bevy of adjectives and modifiers, it's unending. Like, I understand the need to have a unique URL and search term and everything, but again, only wanting to like speak positively, it can make a lot of conversations extremely not even just like about semantics, actually about syntax. And then it's like, what is transformation versus innovation versus change? And then it becomes, intentionally or not, a very English language discussion. And how can it matter which English term we use when we're including people who that's not even their language? So
Well, yeah, we've got. I mean, even on this call, we've got at least 6 versions of English going on, and that's a real challenge in my experience. So never mind bringing in Thomas in Hong Kong and our friends in China, or in the Asian arena. That's a very real challenge. I do think that Daniel knows, I'm very much about what can we do now, in a sense, as time marches on and urgency is here. And so, there's a couple of things we can do now. I mean, Gary is doing now, and I'm very much aware of what Gary's doing now with the Cbook as one doing this, if I can put it as a sort of an output. Chris, I'd like to know more as you've joined this conversation about what it is you found challenging in the work that you're currently doing, for example, and what particular resources like now or next week might be helpful to you. This sort of sense of urgency and nowness is, for me, helpful because it focuses what can be done rather than talking more about talking. So I don't know if you can answer that.
Wow. Yeah, I can't answer that, but I can speak to a couple aspects of that. So for my sins, I too have been a university academic a couple times. I've given it a try. So I know about formal tertiary level education. And then I have been in the commercial world for technical training. So I have done some adult learner work over my career. But when I got into the trying to bring systems learning or systems education into the health systems in the UK, I've run into a real wall, and that is because analysts within my world are flat out busy. They're already working way more than 40 hours a week. So the whole idea of any time out for CPD is really rare. So they're all keen to do systems training. I can't keep up with it. I've run a course I started last year 6 times already. So it's evolving. So I'm learning more than they are, I think, which is a good Russell Akoff message that I picked up earlier this year, which is that the best way to learn is to teach, and the worst way to learn is to be a student in some ways. So I'm trying to model what I've learned in tertiary education and in adult learner technical education into something that these guys will take up. And the thing that seems to be winning for me at the time is they need to work on their problems. If I can't mold my course, which is a really kind of facilitation juggling kind of experience, much more freewheeling than I've ever tried before, but where the first module is, okay, what problem are we working on this year? Is is really hard work for me, but I think it engages them a little bit better. But I'm just playing at this, right? I really don't have the experience in trying to cultivate learning for people in this area, and I've by happenstance, or maybe by my academic background, I've happened to fall upon systems dynamics first. So that's what I grasp. It seems to have a lot of traction in the health sector already, all over the world. But I've just sort of become aware that it's one of many methodologies. And so I'm trying to understand that as well as proceed with my own stuff. So recently I've come across Michael Jackson. I saw him in your list, Daniel, and his recent book on critical systems thinking, which I purchased in the hope that I would understand this bigger picture of systems. But that was, I think, $80 or 80 pounds, perhaps not well invested. So I've just spent 800 on his course this autumn to see if I can actually figure out what his book means.
Well, good luck.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
Thanks.
this. This is a very important point, and I think a thread that will be in many of the initiatives. It's like pragmatic and epistemic value have to be together, whether it's in the early childhood phase or whether it's like most professionals most of the time. It has to be useful, and that's what people are going to be like wanting to know about, and providing domain-based cases and templates is like one aspect of this. And then like you just described, like interactive, facilitated, maybe even outcome oriented or outcome possible experiences that are social. This is like where I see a lot of these efforts coming together. Gary?
Yeah, so the conversation has reminded me of something that we did a few years ago. So there was an IFSR conversation, unity and diversity, which Bridget and I co-led, and we went into the conversation with the idea of creating a game which would give a systems experience so that people could learn from it. And what we realized through the conversation is that actually in all of our diverse cultures, there are stories that we're told as kids, like Aesop's tales, for instance. But every culture has them. And when you look at those stories, they're actually intended to explain key system concepts and principles that are relevant to everyday life. And I think that is again worth looking at. So I can't remember, the rabbit and the rabbit and the tortoise, for instance. It's slow and steady wins the race, that kind of stuff. So when you analyze these stories, systems, concepts, and principles arise. And if we use those stories as a vehicle for explaining systems concepts, then I think that would be a good way of doing it.
Nice. Thank you, Gary. George?
So going back to my academic years, I designed a set of courses. Now, this was at a college level, but I'm quite convinced it could be done for, say, high school or lower. But the basic idea was using the problem/project mode of pedagogy. That is, the students were learning by doing, not learning by lecture. And the products of their doing, the things that they actually created, was the proof of their understanding of the material that I was trying to get across. Well, these courses were about systems science. And I even succeeded in teaching non-math students how to do a version of system dynamics modeling using a spreadsheet. And working on a problem that they found interesting to start with. And so getting back to the notion of, what kind of materials, supports, things of that nature that the ISSS might be able to sponsor. And we could probably find an education materials company that we could partner with to produce these kinds of things. But I think we also have to be aware of the larger picture about education itself. The whole education system has come under incredible questioning by teachers, for example. Teachers are leaving in droves, only partly because of the experiences of the pandemic. But basically, the educational system has become so sclerotic that people just can't work within it in any kind of meaningful way. So I would combine those two ideas, the fact that we've got an education system that may be crashing in on itself. So if we devoted too much effort to trying to fit into that system, we might end up, just wasting a lot of time, versus coming up with a way to develop the curricular materials, like the various kinds of projects that I had developed, and then putting those out there through different channels, partnering with different forms of education.
I would, in listening to this, I'm reminded that the ISSS is by and large a US membership. And listening to Chris and what we're talking about in terms of projects, I would really encourage us all, and myself included, to remind myself about the US Next Generation Science Standards, which is a community-led effort to create an approach to teaching science in admittedly K through 12 schools in the US, but based on three overlapping ideas. One, it's science and engineering, and what they call disciplinary core ideas. So that's on a discipline by discipline basis. But it's interwoven with project-based learning. So very much a focus on projects as an integral part of it. And the third component is cross-cutting concepts, which I've talked about over the years in my talks on systems literacy and even during the conference in 2019, and having, my colleagues from science education in the US come and talk. So if we're going to be immediately relevant in at least the US school system, I would strongly suggest we're aligned to the next generation science standard, process and content. And even for what Chris is talking about, that as a model could potentially be an interesting one to follow, so that you are very much focused on project-based issues, and that there is a way that Chris can quickly access the most appropriate and others, of course, teachers in schools,
Mm.
the most appropriate number of systems, approaches, ideas, sciences, methodologies, whatever appropriate is appropriate. And that's coupled with this notion of cross-cutting concepts and pulling on disciplinary core ideas, which of course in health there's any number of them, and trying to get that holistic approach across. I mean, one of the problems in healthcare, as I have witnessed it, is it's of course extraordinarily siloed, and holistic healthcare is something that many of us in ISSS are aware of and talking about in different ways. And so there's many people working on this issue within ISSS, Chris, for example,
Okay.
that could give you perspectives. And I can talk to you later about that. Be happy to do that. But
All right, thank
anyway,
you.
that's just another thought. If we are a science organization and we're wanting to impact teachers in schools in the US as one audience, then the next generation science standards has to be well known and utilized.
Thank you. So just to close, I'll stay several minutes after the hour, but no one has to feel like they have to. It's a great first meeting, and again, there's like multiple areas that I know are going to be important to structure. And in what George raised about like playing to a local optimization, systems as they are, systems as they could be, create, the way to mediate that, as I see it, is with flexible and modular approaches, so that like we could be able to render or recommend and present the right kinds of information, take stock of where certain things have already been done, point out key missing areas in that phase space, such that if somebody says, I'm looking for a high school speaking X language, learning about this domain with this method, I think that is highly plausible. And this is even before we get into what I believe will be incredibly important technological developments related to text processing and like high quality translation and a lot of other things in the pipeline there. So there's areas that I know I'm going to be working to organize here. I just wanted to in the last 2 minutes, mention people's participation is like double optional / double voluntary, because as stated, ISSS is a volunteer organization and many people like give so much time and energy to. So if the next 2 weeks or any 2 weeks are not a lot of availability for you, it's totally no worries. There will not be any expectations for people to do anything. If somebody does want to do anything, then I kind of see two modes broadly. First, if you see an opportunity, please go for it. You can always like duplicate a page or make a new sub page if you want to test something out. You can also like select text and add a comment. Hey, would it be okay if I did this if you want? Or just please make the edits yourself. So asynchronously, 29 hours a day, you're welcome to make edits and restructuring. It's just going to be part of how we work, mainly asynchronously. If you want to make a contribution and you don't see, or you don't exactly have precision on how you want to make a contribution, then just email education@isss.org. And then we can just decide then like what would be useful, or just show up at the next meeting and, it's all going to be good. So I hope that people can either like see affordances for their contribution and make them asynchronously, or ask asynchronously where it would be useful, or just continue to digest and reflect and provide input at future meetings. There will be like a feedback before the meeting, such that if you want to have something that you want to discuss, we'll be able to do that as well. So that's all for the meeting itself. If anybody else wants to add anything, please feel free.
Oh, that was very useful. It's really good to make the connections. Quite often when you start out in systems like me in a particular area, you're the only lone voice and you don't have too many sounding boards, if any. So yeah,
I
glad I
agree.
found you.
In all the systems and complexity groups and works, it's like in our lab or working groups or however, we're like the oasis of that way of thinking.
Hmm.
And I think where education fits in is increasing the understanding and applicability of the methods such that it's like 3 out of 10 people who see slow and steady wins the race. And it's like,
Hmm.
and I really like the point with the games and stories, Gary, because it's like, this should be common sense. Common sense, what is common, what is in common to us, what is managing our commons and stewarding our commons should be systems thinking. I don't know how exactly we'll navigate towards that common understanding, but it'll be education of potentially novel kinds. And I just know that by having a regular meeting schedule and a scaffold, like people are going to come from outside of ISSS and from within ISSS and just have like really innovative ideas. And again, by curating like audiences and contacts, then we'll be able to connect the dots like, oh, this person is offering like a free online course. Here's like a whole country. And they're at like a decision point with their education system. Could we deploy this course for like 5 billion people? I don't know. But it seems totally plausible that there are decision points like that where right now, like textbook companies oh, no. We got this. Here's the book. But it doesn't have to be that book. So there could be a lot of ways to go. So again, thank you everybody. I'll close the recording. And
Yeah.
so looking forward to your participation.
Thanks, Daniel. That was great.
Daniel.